China Global Television Network.
This is Global Business. Hello and welcome to the show. I am Peninah Karibe. Let's begin with a look at the markets. The JSE ended the week lower today, tracking most global markets as traders remained cautious after conflicting reports regarding the US-China trade war. Risk appetite abated after US White House trade advisor said there was no agreement to withdraw tariffs on Chinese imports. That contradicted earlier reports. The two countries had agreed to roll back tariffs as part of a partial trade truce, which is expected to be signed in December. Coming up in the show tonight. Gold mining in Burkina Faso threatened following attack on a convoy of workers that left 38 dead. Nigerian businessmen forced to close shops in Ghana as Ghanaians protect their turf. And Zambia finds sweet success away from copper. Let's start in Burkina Faso, where gunmen ambushed an armed convoy transporting members of staff from a Canadian-owned gold mine. At least 38 civilians died, 63 were injured, and dozens more are feared missing. The country has been battling an Islamist insurgency for the last 2 years that has forced firms to invest millions in security. It is also threatening viability of the mines. CGTN's Daniela Pearson has more.
12 of the injured have already been airlifted to a hospital in the capital, Ouagadougou. They are the victims of a deadly attack in Burkina Faso by gunmen who targeted a convoy of buses transporting the staff of Semafo, a Canadian-based mining firm. Sources say that about 250 workers travel under armed military escort each week to its Bungu mine located in the eastern part of the country.
We know for now there are 38 dead and 63 wounded, some lightly, others seriously. Those are the figures we have for the moment. Our troops are on the ground because some people are missing. Some of them are miners. In any case, we are still searching for mine workers.
Public officials say that the government has opened an investigation into the attack.
We have come here, first of all, in the name of His Excellency, the President of Burkina Faso, to see the site alongside the authorities and pass on our encouragement, and also take stock of what happened and pass our solidarity on to the wounded here.
Operations at the mine have been suspended since the incident, which occurred on a public road between the market town of Fada and the Bungu mine. But many families are still waiting for news. It's not clear exactly how many were in the convoy, what their nationalities were, or how many are still missing. Daniela Pearson, CGTN.
Meanwhile, Australian mining services provider Peninah Global Limited has since announced that 19 of its employees were among the people killed in the attack. They worked for its African Mining Services unit, which had been contracted by Semafo for work at its Bungu mine. Geodrill Limited said 2 of its employees were killed in the incident. It remains unclear how many people were in the convoy. Let's move to Ghana now, where more than 100 shops belonging to Nigerian traders have been shut down by the Ghana Union Traders Association. The traders want the government to enforce laws that bar foreigners from engaging in retail trade in Ghana. The move is seen in part as retaliation to Nigeria's partial closure of its borders that blocked goods from Ghana. Trade tensions are seen as escalating between the two countries. The Nigerian community in Ghana has called on both governments to offer a permanent solution. Here's the chairman of the Nigerians in Diaspora organization in Ghana, Chief Kalistas Elazioa.
If Ghanaians are saying that their laws says that we are not supposed to do retail business in the open market, are we going to say Ghanaians are not asking for their right? No, that would be wrong. As long as is the position of the laws of Ghana. Then, if we are also saying that based on the fact that we are members of the ECOWAS community, that we are supposed to coexist here and do our business because of the treaty that Ghana government have entered as a member of the ECOWAS community, should you say we are wrong? I would say we are not wrong until somebody comes and interprets it and explain to us properly. And the people that their responsibility is to do this are not doing it. they allow the ordinary people to be creating unnecessary and unhealthy enmity between the citizens of Nigerians and Ghanaians. And that is not right.
Nabil Ahmed Rifai is in Ghana's capital, Accra, and joins us live from there for more on this. Nabil, has there been any official word from the Ghanaian government on this?
Peninah, there has not been any official word from government as of yet. We know that this is not the first time such a situation is happening. We've seen shops belonging to foreigners, especially Nigerians, being locked in the central business district. But then the government has failed to really make a concrete stance as to how it aims to resolve this situation. There are those who are saying that there is some political undertones to this, because next year is an election year and the government is trying to be very cautious on how it resolves this situation, lest it gets at the wrong side of these traders who are pushing for the laws that bars foreigners from engaging in retail business to be implemented. So for now, we don't have any official statement from government on this current situation happening between traders here in Ghana and the Nigerian counterparts.
Okay, so Nabil, we know Nigeria has closed all its land borders to prevent illegal imports and exports, but how much has this affected trade between these two countries?
Indeed, is really affecting traders, both Ghanaian traders and Nigerian traders. A lot of exporters from Ghana here have their goods stranded at the border in Benin. They've been complaining that most of the goods are getting damaged. Indeed, there is one large local beverage manufacturer who has reported that he's lost over $2 million as the land border in Benin continued to be closed. And a lot of the traders here are also not able to bring in their goods from Nigeria. And the Nigerian, on the other side, are also saying it's affecting their businesses. They are not able to do business here in Ghana because they can't bring their goods from their country. It's really had a toll on a lot of businesses here in Ghana as well as those in Nigeria exactly.
So what efforts are in place to have trade between the two countries resume, and how soon could we see that happen?
Peninah, this situation has happened since August, and we know that the government of Ghana has been in talks with the government of Nigeria. Indeed, we've seen that the Foreign Affairs Minister here in Ghana and also the Trade Minister have been meeting with the Foreign Affairs Minister of Nigeria to see how best they can resolve the situation. They've made Ghana understand that this land border closure is not actually targeting Ghanaians, and the Nigerian government, together with the Ghanaian government, have decided to create a temporary corridor with Nigeria's western border in Benin to allow goods from Ghana pass through that site, and also goods meant for the Ghanaian market to also move from Nigeria to Ghana. This is the temporary measure that we understand is currently being put in place. It's not yet taking effect as of yet, because we understand Nigeria has extended its border closure to January 2020. But then these are the talks that are going on between both countries on how this temporary corridor that is going to be created will allow business to go on between Ghana and Nigeria. Peninah.
All right, Nabil, thank you for that. Nabil Ahmed Rifai live in Accra. Meanwhile, hundreds of key African influencers from various sectors have converged in the Nigerian capital, Abuja, for the African Economic Congress themed The Africa We Want. Regional integration and the anxiety over the Africa Free Trade Zone Agreement are central to discussions at the Congress. CGTN's Kelechi Mekalam has more.
Gathering of more than 500 brain boxes from across Africa. The participants are drawn from government, the academia, civil society and private sector. It's a strategic meeting aimed at fostering economic growth and development across the continent. And one of the focal points is easing the bottlenecks around the African Continental Free Trade Agreement.
I call upon all African leaders to fast-track more inclusive integration for shared prosperity in our continent. I call upon the member states who have not ratified the FCTA to do so, to allow us to continue with our journey towards realizing the Africa we want.
So the 0 point about all that we are discussing here is on how religiously we can implement. I've seen the documents of AFTA. How that can be implemented will be dependent on an efficient custom and immigration service, well-funded and well-equipped to work. No matter what we do, as far as those institutions are where they are, we'll simply be wasting our time.
Forming a single unified market and harmonizing trade rules at both regional and continental levels have been subject for panel debates here. Many are pushing for government to commit to the cause and not just on paper.
We've been hearing a lot of initiatives, nice initiatives like African passports, visa facilitations, regional passports, but unfortunately these initiatives have stayed in political discourse but not translated into political actions.
The African Continental Free Trade Agreement aims at boosting trade between African countries. Nigeria joined the pact in July this year, but the country recently shut its land borders to curb illegal smuggling. For now, expectations of driving richer exports and high intra-Africa trade remains limited, at least until the borders are open again, and that could be in about 2 months' time. Kelechi Amekalam, CGTN Abuja, Nigeria.
Some corporate headlines now. And in Nigerian industrial conglomerate Dangote Group has signed deals to make phosphate into fertilizer and build a cement factory in Togo. Dangote's project would process some of that phosphate to make fertilizer in country, aiming to export to the region. The cost of the project is around $2 billion. South Africa's Tiger Brands is exploring the sale of its processed meats business. This follows last year's temporary closure following the world's largest listeria outbreak that killed more than 200 people in the country. The unit's revenue slid 79% in the 6 months to end March, prompting an operating loss of $20 million. The company is facing a class action lawsuit over its role in the incident. Congolese copper and cobalt producer Katanga Mining Limited says it will raise around $5.8 billion through a rights issue as part of a debt for equity swap with parent company Glencore. The cobalt producer will subsequently owe Glencore $1.5 billion, reducing its debt from $7.7 billion after experiencing setbacks, including a fall in the price of cobalt. And Alibaba plans to launch a share offering to raise between $10 and $15 billion in Hong Kong in the final week of November. The deal is expected to boost the Asian financial hub as it struggles with anti-government protests. The US-listed Chinese e-commerce giant is due to seek approval from Hong Kong's listing committee for a deal that Dialogic Data showed will be the world's biggest ever cross-border secondary listing. And that's a look at your corporate news. You're watching Global Business. Coming up after the break. The showing by some African countries as the China International Import Expo comes to an end. And a look at the future of Africa's oil through a new book, Billions at Play.
The world economy as we know it is about to change. Global business reports highlight emerging markets, developing countries, and dynamic sectors worldwide. We feature top analysts and newsmakers to provide perspectives on every facet of business. From an on-the-ground perspective, we provide you with balanced and objective assessments. Fast, sharp, and insightful. Global Business, only on CGTN.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and Global Business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector. Problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
At the opening of the second China International Import Expo, President Xi Jinping reiterated China's commitment to being a source of global demand. She says China is ready to open its arms to countries to provide more growth and investment opportunities. CGTN's Uche Okoronko was there, and she brings you the following report.
In this one room, a spectacular presentation of the best the world has to offer. From the finest cigars and rum, the latest in cutting-edge technology, to uniquely choreographed dances. Each of the 61 nations present are here to pitch their cultural identity and economic wealth to China's vast market. There is a reason why this year's National Pavilion is especially crowded. Several of the initiatives that China promised would further open up its economy have by and large been put in place. Also, several new relationships have been established. For many of the nations who are here at this expo, this is a green channel or an easier route into China's massive consumer market. For the Dominican Republic, this is a first. The nation only just kicked off diplomatic relations with China in 2018. At the Expo, the Caribbean country is not just selling itself as a promising tourist destination, it is also an exporter of tobacco, pineapples, bananas, and cocoa.
Companies actually from both countries are doing business with rum. We came with the cigars, also the cocoa beans and the coffee. And this year we wanted to actually try with new products. So for example, we brought Larimar, which is a special stone only in the Dominican Republic, and also minerals. So we're expecting actually to increase. And this year, for example, we have been increasing exports from the Dominican Republic to China, and China is being actually one of our main partners in business.
Nations like Russia are on the fast track to hitting $200 billion in trade turnover with China by 2024. They are here to nurture new growth points in their relationship with the country, and the focus has been on innovation, such as this Russian-made presidential state car designed and produced by engineering firm NAMI.
We worked a lot with the Chinese companies, so they support us with some of the parts, for example, or with creating some of the technological parts like multimedia or something like that. And now we're coming here to provide some support from our side, from engineering.
This year, just 8 African nations were at the National Pavilion, including South Africa and Tanzania. China is Africa's largest trading partner. African exports to the country rose to 15% by 2018, from just 3% in 2001. But they still remain low value-added commodity-based goods. Countries like Côte d'Ivoire are trying to change that, seeking a market in China for products such as textiles.
Our textiles are produced in Côte d'Ivoire. They are mostly handmade products which are weaved together using the local materials. Today, I've met with the local Chinese who want the Made in Africa product that is not only good quality, but it's celebrating the African culture and style.
The Expo has been touted as a new approach to global trade. It is the world's first national exhibition focusing on imports, symbolic of China's expanding trade liberalization agenda. Uche Okoronkwo, CGTN, Shanghai.
Billions at Play, a book that explores the future of Africa's energy sector, has been launched in South Africa. This was during the Africa Oil Week, where deals worth billions were signed. CGTN's Travis Andrews spoke to the author, NJ Ayuk, and now reports.
Music, canapes, and the movers and shakers of Africa's oil industry sets the perfect mood for a new book that seems to be very bullish about the future of the continent's oil sector. billions at play lifts the lid on the industry as a whole and gives some key insights that can be used to boost the energy sector on the continent in a way that can benefit more people.
This book is about Africa. It's about Africa's oil industry. It's about how to make energy work for Africa. We have looked at saying, how do we negotiate good deals? How do we do good deals? How do we drive new things in the African continent? And how do we make sure that all of Africa is inclusive? And also, how do we transition from oil and gas into a new dynamic with energy, with global climate change and energy transition?
The book is the second release by NJ Ayuk, an African lawyer with years of experience in closing deals on the continent. It's not just an insightful and comprehensive read, it's entertaining as well. The event was also attended by a number of key industry stakeholders, including energy ministers.
It is bullish about Africa's oil sector because sometimes we criticize the energy industry a lot, but this industry has done a lot for Africa. It creates a lot of opportunities. It is going to do a lot. It has its shortcomings. We have to fix it. So the idea is fix what is not working, keep what is working.
It has a strong narrative that promotes entrepreneurship on the continent, especially amongst the younger generation, and also discusses international best practices that the industry can follow. Now, the book might be bullish about Africa's oil sector, but what exactly do the investors think?
The investors, the banks, the funds who are interested in participating in this play, it gives them knowledge, first-hand expertise and expertise, first-hand knowledge, expertise into what goes on in the continent. So it's a book that addresses the issues, the key issues.
But now, judging by the interest shown in the book, it may make for a very good read. Travis Andrews, CGTN, Cape Town.
The UK is in the midst of an election campaign after a 3-month delay to the date it's due to leave the European Union. Prime Minister Boris Johnson is seeking a fresh mandate to execute the Brexit deal he reached with Brussels. However, these developments have created uncertainty in Africa about the continent's future relations with Britain and the EU. CGTN's Michael Baleka reports from Kampala.
Packaging for export. These garden eggs are headed for Europe, but much of the consignment will end up in the United Kingdom. But with no Brexit deal fully signed off yet, many African exporters can't be sure how easily their products will access the UK in the future.
For us in Africa, it comes down to economics, because different African countries are part of different regional blocs, and these different regional blocs have signed agreements with the EU. Now, for UK, one of the biggest economies in the EU, to pull out, that means African countries in the different blocs must negotiate afresh.
Some states and blocs have negotiated market access continuity agreements with Britain to ease post-Brexit trade. But there are African nations yet to start the process. Uganda currently trades with the UK on World Trade Organization terms. But if it were to try for a trade deal with the UK after Brexit, it could be a tough negotiation.
UK already knows that it comprises a big share of our market to EU. So in our panic not to, lose out on that market, we might end up agreeing to terms which are not favorable for our development.
Last year, the value of Uganda's exports to the United Kingdom were close to $10 million US, according to the United Nations Comtrade database on international trade. This accounts for about 35% of Uganda's total exports to the European Union. The East African community is developing a strategy to guide the region's negotiations of free trade agreements with third parties, including Britain. And economic analysts argue that negotiating as a bloc would give the EAC countries bargaining power for better deals. And local entrepreneurs believe this may be a good time for Britain to think about investing on the continent.
We've had a lot of infrastructure development, which would not have happened and was not happening at the pace at which we wanted it. And there are still large gaps, especially for infrastructure. So if Britain can step up its game, if European Union can also step up its game, out of this new friction, new uncertainty, all these people are now looking at Africa.
In October, more than 40 African leaders made their way to the Black Sea resort city of Sochi for the inaugural Russia-Africa summit. More than $12 billion worth of deals were signed off as Moscow seeks new partnerships in Africa. So the UK faces stiff competition for business in the region.
Now for us, with Britain also, we're looking at some kind of Brexit New Deal, where we can open up new avenues, where they are going to play a more aggressive role in trying to do business in Africa.
In January 2020, Britain is planning to host a UK-Africa summit, and it's here that the UK is expected to conclude different free trade arrangements with former colonies, especially in sub-Saharan Africa. A deal many local exporters here in Uganda are looking forward to. Michael Balekesi, GTN, Kampala, Uganda.
Africa economists and development experts are in Tunisia debating on ways to improve the continent's monetary system. They are seeking to develop a system that will better serve Africa's development needs. CGTN's Adnet Shawashi has more.
Researchers have been discussing the challenges faced by African communities and governments as they use a globalized capitalist finance system for development.
L'Afrique a un potentiel énorme en termes d'épargne.
Africa has a huge potential in terms of savings. The money which leaves the continent far exceeds the amount received. These resources should be further developed within an efficient financial system so that African money finances transformation on the continent.
On a 400 milliards de dollars dans les fonds de pension.
Development economists reflected on the patterns and diversity of monetary dependency and sovereignty throughout the continent and how monetary dependency interacts with other forms of dependency such as trade and debt.
With more monetary sovereignty, we have more economic sovereignty, and vice versa. This will help to create jobs for the majority, develop capacity and stabilize more economies, unlike what we see. This is a historic conference.
Experts also shed light on the weakness in the industrialization process in Africa. The main constraint, they noted, is the focus on low-value added assembly line production as opposed to high-value added content of exports.
So every time we try to accelerate exports, to accelerate the process of industrialization, you end up importing more technology, more raw materials, and more intermediate goods and more components, which happen to be high value-added content. And then you use cheap labor and deregulated labor markets, deregulated environmental rules, and so on, and subsidies from the government in order to export low value-added assembly line manufacturing products.
The international conference was an opportunity to discuss the challenges facing African communities and governments and the institutional constraints imposed by both the European Union and other international financial institutions, such as the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank. Experts assert that alternative forms of organizing financial and monetary systems can enable the transformation and development of Africa. They view monetary sovereignty as a pillar in the quest for economic and political independence. Adnan Shawashi, CGTN, Tunis.
This is Global Business. Still ahead. China and the US agreed to roll back tariffs on each other's products. And what is the big deal about blockchain?
No one again, he can hold in guns. Machine guns from police forces toward the protesters.
Were you worried about your life at that particular time? Not at all.
The Excellency, thank you very much for your time. What is your assessment of the state of the continent today?
Africa has the potential to power itself.
Excuse me.
Recapping headlines at this hour, at least 38 people were killed and dozens still remain unaccounted for following an ambush on an armed convoy transporting staff from a Canadian-owned gold mine in Burkina Faso. The country is among countries currently battling an Islamist insurgency. The affiliation of the assailants involved in Wednesday's attack remains unknown. The UN is now warning of a looming humanitarian crisis caused by floods in South Sudan. So far, more than 400,000 people have been displaced. Many of the victims did not salvage their belongings and are now dependent on humanitarian aid. The UN has released $10 million for intervention. Still in South Sudan, President Salva Kiir says he accepts a delay of another 100 days in forming a unity government in order to avoid a return to war. The unity government was supposed to have been formed by November 12th, but differences remain between President Kiir and opposition leader Riek Machar, leading to a postponement. And swarms of locusts have invaded Ethiopia's 9 states. Farmers in northern Amhara say they have lost nearly 100% of their crops. According to the Food and Agriculture Organization, insecurity in some parts of the country has hampered intervention efforts. The Ethiopian government has called for immediate action in combating the situation. And that's a look at some of the day's top stories. Let's now shift focus to the world's top 2 economies. China and the United States have agreed to roll back tariffs on each other's products. The move comes amid rising hopes that the 2 economies will sign a pact that declares an end to a trade fight that has disrupted the global economy. CGTN's James Spellman reports from Washington.
Trade negotiators appear to be making significant progress toward ending the China-US trade war, agreeing to roll back tariffs.
In the past 2 weeks, the leaders of both sides have conducted serious and constructive discussions on properly addressing their core concerns and agreed to a phased cancellation of tariff increases depending on the progress of negotiations.
Last month, while meeting with Chinese Vice Premier Liu He, President Trump announced negotiators were close to an agreement on the first phase of a deal that would address intellectual property concerns and provide greater market access in China for U.S. financial services firms. Trump also said China would purchase more U.S. agricultural products. At the time, the U.S. only agreed to cancel a small scheduled tariff increase. There was no announcement about the massive tariffs the 2 countries began slapping on each other's products a year and a half ago. That appears to have changed.
The trade war was started with the increasing tariffs and should be terminated by the elimination of tariffs. If the 2 sides can reach a first phase agreement based on the deal, the already imposed tariffs should be cancelled proportionately. This is an important condition for reaching an agreement.
No details have been released about a timetable or which tariffs would be dropped. If an agreement is finalized, it would be good news for American farmers. Many of them rely on the Chinese market.
We've been disappointed that it has taken this long, but we're still hopeful that we're still going to get the best trade agreement possible.
Analysts say implementation of the first phase of a trade deal would have wide-ranging benefits.
Very important to have a first step which is substantial in terms of reduction of existing tariff. Then it's going to be a lot better for the 2 economies involved and more in general for the global economy.
President Trump had hoped to sign an agreement for the first phase of this trade deal with Chinese President Xi Jinping at the APEC leaders meeting in Chile next week. That event has since been canceled. The 2 countries are now trying to find an alternative time and place for the presidents to sign a deal if an agreement can be finalized. Jim Spellman, CGTN, Washington.
Global debt has surged to a record high of $188 trillion compared to $164 trillion in 2016. International Monetary Fund Chief Kristalina Georgieva warns that private sector debt accounts for the vast majority of the total, which could cripple global economic growth.
Debt has reached all-time high levels, 188 trillion, the equivalent of 230% of world output. Public debt in advanced economies is at levels not seen since the Second World War. Emerging markets public debt is at level not seen since the 1980s debt crisis. And low-income countries are witnessing sharp increases in their debt burdens over the last 5 years.
In a year dominated by news about 5G and artificial intelligence, blockchain is resurfacing. About 4,000 people have descended on the Chinese city of Wuzhen for the second World Blockchain Conference. CGTN reporter Lucy Rui takes us there.
It may yet be our best defense in the world of digital information exchanges. High-profile scholars and program developers have come to Wuzhen to discuss the future of blockchain and its use in the Chinese market. The technology is designed to incorporate a wide range of applications, including financial, communications, gaming, and so on, and is hoped to drastically increase security and convenience for users. However, experts at the second World Blockchain Conference say the technology is still in its infancy in China, and we won't see it in our everyday lives for at least another 2 to 3 years.
Many countries are competing. US, Europe, Japan, Singapore, many countries are investing heavily in this field. China, we have very good internet adoption, and we have companies like Ant Financial, like Alibaba. We are investing heavily. We think we are on the front line of this wave.
The eagerness of Chinese developers and entrepreneurs has been reignited after President Xi Jinping proposed blockchain as a breakthrough for independent technology innovations in China and called for the acceleration of blockchain technology development. Top Network, a high-performance blockchain platform, launched its public chain platform at the conference. The company is gearing up to boost China's development in this regard with its 80 million users.
You may notice that the communication industry or invoice has already been implemented. A lot of blockchain technology inside it. So I think just maybe 1 year or two, China will be taking a leader role in the world.
Lucy Rui, CGTN, Zhejiang.
Indeed, the concept of blockchain has increasingly become very hot. But what exactly is it and how is it used?
What is blockchain? A blockchain is, in the simplest of terms, a time-stamped series of immutable record of data that is managed by a cluster of computers not owned by any single entity. Each of these blocks of data are secured and bound to each other using cryptographic principles or chain. How does it work? The blockchain is a simple way of passing information from A to B in a fully automated and safe manner. One party to a transaction initiates the process by creating a block. This block is verified by thousands, perhaps millions of computers distributed around the net. The verified block is added to a chain which is stored across the net, creating not just a unique record, but a unique record with a unique history. Falsifying a single record would mean falsifying the entire chain in millions of instances, which is virtually impossible. So what's so disruptive about this technology? The blockchain network has no central authority. It is the very definition of a democratized system. Since it is a shared and immutable ledger, the information in it is open for anyone and everyone to see. Hence, anything that is built on the blockchain is transparent, and everyone involved is accountable for their actions.
China is a world leader in many emerging technologies, but here's one you may not have expected. The World Intellectual Property Organization says nearly 3/4 of all global blockchain patent applications come from Chinese companies. Our reporter Marco explains some of the areas they're focusing on.
Blockchain may have started out as a novel concept in the virtual world, but more than a decade later, it has swelled into something much greater. Industry pioneers are now busy exploring the practical ways it can benefit real economy, like those at Jingdong Digits, who use it for product authentication purposes.
Take this infant milk powder, for example. If you scan this QR code, you can see a blockchain certificate recognized by the government. It includes the country of origin, processing techniques, and logistics information.
And it's also been used in healthcare.
We work with the Medical Products Administration to authenticate vaccines. So when you get a shot, you can see when your vaccine entered the hospital and if it had been stored correctly. In the future, we hope to trace it all the way back to the pharmaceuticals.
Other developers see it as a chance for philanthropy. Alipay's operator Ant Financial launched in September the Charity on Chain project. It works with a host of stakeholders to ensure your charitable donations reach their intended targets. Even local governments are getting in on the act. Researchers at Tencent use blockchain to help reduce paperwork for tax bureaus by using e-invoices. The company also explores blockchain-based solutions for law enforcement against identity theft.
Because we think it can increase the data exchange between different entities. The different department of Chinese ministries, they also want to collaborate more with each other in the area of identity and in the area of security.
Blockchain is often referred to as the ceiling breaker. For economy, it helps to break the limits for traditional businesses by solving the problem of mutual trust. But maybe its true value, or its value for the general public, lies in the vision of a more secure, convenient, and honest society. Ivanka, CGTN in Beijing.
A New York state judge has ordered U.S. President Donald Trump to pay $2 million to an array of charities as a fine for misusing his own charitable foundation to further his political and business interests. The judge imposed the penalty in connection with a lawsuit brought against Trump by the New York Attorney General's office over the handling of the Trump Foundation's assets.
There already was a stipulation settling and winding up and liquidating the Donald Trump Foundation. All that came in new in this decision was this personal liability for $2 million, which is small in terms of what the overall case could have required. For example, the Attorney General of New York asked that Donald Trump be barred for life from ever again running a foundation, and the New York judge refused to grant that. That would have been something more shocking. The money here is going to go to some 8 charities, all of which are well known and not in any way connected to Donald Trump. So I doubt there's going to be an appeal.
It's a celebration of science, drawing in everyone from tech giants to Hollywood celebrities. The Breakthrough Awards. Now, this year's winners represented fields ranging from quantum mechanics to neuroscience. And CGTN's Mark New was on the red carpet in the heart of Silicon Valley to tell us more about the event dubbed the Oscars of Science.
Inside a hangar at NASA's Ames Research Center, the Breakthrough Prize is the only event where Hollywood stars grace the red carpet to celebrate scientific achievement.
I think celebrating the work of the people tonight's honorees have done is much more important than any film or record album or sporting event.
We are not here just to make it cool and for people to hear about it, but for the younger generation to look at this as a sexy career to get into.
Perhaps there was nothing sexier in science this year than capturing the first image of a supermassive black hole. Winning the Breakthrough Prize in Fundamental Physics, a team of 347 scientists at 60 institutions in 20 countries, including China.
Our Chinese colleagues are helping not only with analyzing the data and taking the data, but also with the telescopes actually used to collect the data. There's so much that divides us as people these days. There's politics, there's business, there's borders. But what was nice about this project is we sidestepped all of that.
Each Breakthrough Prize is $3 million. Awards are presented in the fields of life sciences, fundamental physics, and mathematics. Chinese-American Virginia Man-Yi Lee took home this year's Life Sciences Prize. She won for her research on how protein tangles in the brain lead to degenerative diseases like Alzheimer's.
It's a great honor and to receive this award. And you know, I still go to work every day. I still have to do the science, and I think it's wonderful to be recognized.
The Breakthrough Awards also handed out 6 $100,000 prizes called New Horizon Awards to early career physicists and mathematicians. China native Xie Chen won for her work in quantum mechanical systems.
I'm very happy that the kind of fundamental research that we do are recognized, because this is not something that's going to make money tomorrow.
Scientists of tomorrow got a boost from the Breakthrough Junior Challenge. High school senior Jeffrey Chen won a $250,000 scholarship and another $150,000 for his school for his video exploring neutrino astronomy.
I did not think I'd win the Breakthrough Junior Challenge when I was making the video, but I'm definitely really grateful and really excited that it ended up being that way.
Key sponsors of the Breakthrough Prize include Tencent founder Pony Ma, Facebook co-founder Mark Zuckerberg, and Google co-founder Sergey Brin, all working to build the event into the Oscars of science. Mork News, CGTN, Mountain View, California.
Smartphones have helped fuel South Korea's economy and a troubling addiction for teens. So the government is holding camps across the country, helping students learn how to unplug. CGTN's Jack Barton visited one camp where teenagers have to get through 2 weeks without a phone.
We've been asked not to use real names or reveal identities at this government-run camp. One of 16 across South Korea, helping teenage boys and girls break their addiction to mobile phones.
According to government figures, 98% of South Korean teens used a mobile device in 2018, during which time the Ministry for Communications Technology also warned that about 30% of 10 to 19-year-olds were classified as over-dependent.
The focus here is on group activities and mandatory counselling sessions. A counsellor asks what is causing stress in their lives. A 13-year-old boy answers that he feels physically underdeveloped and frail. Later, he tells me his parents sent him here because of marathon gaming sessions on his phone.
I get very irritated when I play games. So when my mom asks me a question, I answer with an irritated voice, which get me into fights with my mom.
Initially, he wanted to leave. A common reaction according to supervisors.
When students come here to the camp for the first time, they're nervous. And to adapt to this, the different environment, you can see a very exploratory atmosphere. And here you can see behaviour such as rejection on their part because they can't use the internet or a smartphone.
Staff here witness positive change. But no, a 12-day break from phones isn't enough.
The most important thing is to maintain this in their real life. After this camp, each province has a teenage counselling programme, and we are connected to these groups that can then keep counselling them for 2 months. The students are encouraged to keep up the counselling, even when they return to their normal lives.
This young man has moved beyond his early resistance.
I'm trying to put all my effort into spending less time on the internet and having fewer fights with my mom.
In the t-shirt making sessions, his design is the word dream. It's the name of his group at the camp, which has become a band of real friends sharing real experiences that supervisors hope will provide a foundation to succeed back in the real world where there is no chance at all of avoiding phones, but perhaps some chance of learning to control their overuse. Jack Barton, CGTN, Muju in South Korea.
Let's look at the commodities market. Gold prices edged lower today and were on track for the biggest weekly decline in 2 to 2.5 years as a stronger dollar weighed, while optimism around US-China trade talks dented bullion safe haven appeal. Oil prices too fell, weighed down by lingering uncertainty about how close the US and China were to a trade deal and on rising US crude inventories. Still ahead on Global Business. Zambia finds sweet success away from copper.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Peninah, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines.
one else will take you where we can in North Africa. And no one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
U.S. White House advisor Ivanka Trump has received a warm welcome in Morocco. During her three-day visit, Trump intends on helping women in the country to build wealth and financial independence by owning land or other property. The move is part of the Women's Global Development and Prosperity Initiative. This is a U.S. government program she spearheads that has a goal of helping 50 million women in developing countries advance economically by 2025. The initiative focuses on helping women develop job skills and succeed as entrepreneurs, along with changing cultures and laws. Zambia is currently the second largest copper producer in Africa. In recent years, the Southern African nation has been trying to expand its exports beyond copper to diversify its economy. As CGTN's Peninah Karibe now reports, it seems Zambia may have found just the right product to do just that.
Tons of raw honey that would have ordinarily been sold cheap or used to brew village alcohol are now finding their way into warehouses like this, ready to be processed for export. Meet Pandolika got into what he calls a sticky but sweet business after realizing the opportunity to sell his country's unique product to the rest of the world.
Every hive has a different flavor. Every pound or kg of Zambian tree honey harvested tastes different, just depending on what the bees are eating in that forest area, what's around it, what flowers are grown, stuff like that. So it's very unique in a sense, you know what I'm saying? No honey around the world has that variation. Every packet, every pouch, every jar you see won't taste the same.
The first stage of processing sees this machine is squeeze the honey out of the comb. And so what you see here is literally off the tree branch, and it is pure, unadulterated sweetness, which is already trickling through the entire Zambian economy.
Honey production, currently sitting at 2,000 tons per annum, is set to grow to over 10,000 on the back of increased exports, whose value has already jumped from $1.6 million in 2015 to $3.1 million in 2018.
We have been known to be copper producers for centuries. Now we want to diversify and go into other industries. Honey exports can be a key component in the growth of the economy and fight against poverty in Zambia through job and wealth creation.
More than 30,000 rural beekeepers are expected to propel the industry, which has radically changed their way of life.
It can really help people out there where there's nothing. Like where we're getting this honey, there's literally nothing. It's just dense forest, a couple of mud huts, this and that. So that way, it's really, we feel proud in a sense.
As does the nation that's abuzz with anticipation about the prospects for the future. Peninah Karibe, CGTN, Lusaka, Zambia.
Plastic waste has become a major problem in Africa. A young Guinean is doing her part to curb this problem by making recycled plastic paving stones from waste plastic. Here's CGTN's Terry Wangari with more.
Mariam Mohamed Keita pedals the bike that allows her to heat the fire. Another one stirs the substance in the tank. In just 6 months, Mariam's company was able to recycle 5 tons of plastic in the Guinean capital, Conakry. Her workshop began almost by chance.
During a walk in search for jobs, I noticed piles of plastic throughout the capital. That's how I decided to do something to change this image. I explained the project to my husband, and together we reflected and went on cobblestones production because no one has yet thought of this project in Guinea.
Mariam and her team work 7 hours a day to make 40 cobbles. At Binedu Global Services, the square meter of the plastic cobble is sold for about $6 against $7 for cement pavers. The young Guinean entrepreneur says she has taken into account the risks of turning plastic waste into cobblestones in her project.
My only goal was to set up the company while taking into account the protection of the environment through pollution prevention. I spoke with an environmentalist friend of mine about the impact of my project. It was about assessing the negative and positive sides. All plastics collected will no longer be in gutters. This is already a step in the sanitation of Conakry.
Some analysts find the project of processing plastic waste into pavers innovative but dangerous. According to them, the black carbon released by the combustion of plastics contributes to climate change and air pollution, which could increase the risk of acute respiratory diseases and chronic diseases such as lung cancer.
In order to stop talking about plastics in our society, focus must be on the production of biodegradable waste. It's also about influencing or creating measures that encourage companies to recycle or reuse in their value chains. But plastic packaging companies must also be able to reuse their packaging. That's to say, when a customer buys a product and he comes back with the same plastic bag at the next purchase, he receives a discount on the purchase price. The government must also develop taxation approaches for companies that produce plastic bags.
Thanks to her leadership, Mariam and her team have managed to make some deals with private companies and individuals. Today, she plans to expand her business within the country while spreading awareness on the dangers of plastic waste in the West African nation. Terry Wangari, CGTN.
Let's look at the currencies now. The Kenyan shilling firmed against the dollar today, supported by inflows of hard currency from offshore investors buying government debt and bank shares at the stock market. South Africa's rand weakened after nationwide electricity blackouts overnight by ailing state utility Eskom spooked investors and reignited worries about the economy. The rand slipped about 0.46% to 14.78 to the dollar, compared to a close of 14.74 in the previous session. And with that, to come to the end of Global Business tonight, do send your feedback to the contacts on the screen and follow us on our digital media platforms. I'm Peninah Karibe. Thank you for watching.